As usual, there was a lot to unpack on this Sunday morning, and joining us at the table, Democratic political analyst Marianne Marsh and Republican analyst Jenny Buckingham. It's great to see you guys. Let's start with Boston's race for mayor, and I know it's early May and it's not early November yet, but let's talk about the numbers. In a head-to-head matchup that people saw first on 5, Mayor Wu is in a strong position heading into the fall. It's a New Hampshire Institute of Politics at St. Anselm College poll, and it finds more than half of likely voters believe that she should be reelected. Her opponent, Josh Kraft, more than 30 points behind her. Kraft says it's too early to pay attention to the polls. The mayor says the only poll that really matters is obviously the one that's on Election Day, which is still months away. Marianne, let's start with you. What does it say about the state of the race right now?
A lot.
A lot.
I mean, if you're Josh Kraft, the trend is not your friend. And that's in the rule in politics. And Josh Kraft is losing support, losing ground, not making up ground, which he already had double digits to overcome. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, and Jenny and I were talking about this, there's just the fundamental issue that people don't know Josh Kraft. They know the name Kraft, they know Robert Kraft, and as a result, two things happen. One, when he goes after Michelle Wu, everyone's like, who are you? And what standing do you have to make those claims? And number two, he ends up having to answer a lot of questions about his father. And we saw that this week about the plane and other things. And when you're explaining, you're not winning.
Ginny, it's May 4th, not November 4th. So isn't there enough time or?
Well, what you say when a poll actually matters is a poll doesn't matter. This poll matters. And besides defining yourself, you have to define what issues you're going to fight your campaign on. How do you do both of those things? You spend money early if you have it. He had it. He didn't spend it. I don't understand. I think he's in a really tough position now.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That same poll shows there are some warning signs for Mayor Wu. 67% of people polled disapprove of the mayor's housing policy. 66% disapprove of traffic management, and dare I say it, bike lanes, bus lanes. 57% are against the city's response to homelessness. Ginny, does Kraft have an opening here?
Could have had an opening had he done what he should have done from the beginning, which is spend his money early and set the terms of the race. It might be too late.
What do you think, Marianne?
I agree with Jenny, and I would point to another number in that poll that matters more than those numbers. Two of the three issues you just pointed out are really national problems. Everybody's got those problems in housing and homelessness. But it's the 70% of voters who they polled who live in Boston said they really like living in Boston.
Their quality of life.
We've talked about that all along. That is an almost insurmountable hurdle.
Mayor Wu also in that poll, it did appear as though she's been able to nationalize this race. It seems like it's Mayor Wu versus Trump.
I mean, the best thing that ever happened to her was that congressional hearing.
Right.
Because we all like a fighter. Whether you like her politics or not, we like a fighter for Boston, and she showed that she was in that instance.
Yeah, and the David Ortiz endorsement this week, when she says, sticks up for Boston, and no one did that better than David Ortiz after the Boston Marathon bombing. So
Next step. Let's move to the first big shakeup of the second Trump administration. Mike Waltz is out as national security advisor. He is going to go through an approval process for the UN ambassador. Weeks ago, we learned that he had, as we know, added a journalist to a chat about military plans. Waltz is being nominated for the United Nations ambassador, as we mentioned. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will now pull double duty. He will serve as acting national security advisor while keeping the top job at the state. So he'll have both. That has been done before. Henry Kissinger did it before, so it's been done before. Jenny, let me ask you, many people are expecting a resignation, not a reassignment. What do you make of that?
I think they were too clever by half, because now he's going to have to go before the Senate for confirmation for this new role. So Signalgate is going to be the story for ongoing weeks, when they could have just put it to bed and gotten rid of him. So they've made a bed now that it's going to be kind of tricky to navigate. He might not get through.
What do you think, Marianne?
Well, I hope if he lies under oath, which they all did, I hope someone finally holds him accountable for that, number one. Number two, this was all politics. So Trump, in his first term, fired Michael Flynn like 24 days into his first term in the White House. And then literally weeks later, Michael Flynn showed up at a dinner in Moscow next to Vladimir Putin. And the reason he was fired was because of his relationship with the Russian ambassador. Now you have Mike Waltz, who absolutely compromised our national security. There's no debate about that. And they wanted to wait for 101 days to not punish him, but reassign him. And that tells you everything about what national security means to Donald Trump.
By doing what they did, they certainly did admit that it is an issue. What about the Kissinger thing? Kissinger did both jobs, 50, 60 years ago. Can Marco Rubio do both jobs today?
No, sorry, go ahead.
You want more voices at the table. You want smart, calm, experienced people at the table, not just one voice. I hope they find the right person.
And he's not doing one job well, let alone four. He's got four jobs.
Right.
And I wouldn't hold Henry Kissinger up as the paragon of great diplomacy and anything else. And Richard Nixon seems to be Donald Trump's North Star. But with all that said, people around the world, am I calling Marco Rubio because he's Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, head of the archives, or 40 other things? I mean, that's terrible.
USAID as well. All right,
yeah.
President
All right.
Donald Trump's first 100 days are up. They've come and gone. By the numbers, the president signed a record 143 executive orders. The administration has faced 123 lawsuits. There is no official federal layoff number, but a Hearst television data team analysis shows 49,000 plus. Marianne, your biggest takeaway?
Donald Trump said he would make everything better the first day he was in the White House. And yet he's made everything worse in the first 100 days that he's been in the White House. And it is indisputable, not only by those numbers, but by the polling numbers. The vast majority of people in this country in 100 days have rejected Donald Trump. What he's doing, how he's acting on the economy, on tariffs, go down the list. They have rejected everything he is doing. And yet Donald Trump keeps doing things he legally cannot do. He's broken more laws in 100 days than he did in 4 years, the first time he was in the White House and was impeached twice.
Marianne's always got a spirited takeaway. So
Yes,
what's yours?
Yes, she does. So I think a more fair assessment would be that he's done one thing really well. The border is secure. That we can say that with a straight face is pretty astounding, and I do give him credit for that. He's been okay on other things like Israel. I give him credit for that. Otherwise, it's been kind of a clown car, kind of a clown show, a chaos machine. That can't be sustained because people are watching their retirements shrink. They're
Right.
watching their job prospects go away. It's got to calm down.
So it's the same way that Stephen Lynch characterized it in a conversation with you. The clown show.
Yeah. Oh, really?
I believe he
Yeah.
said Island of Misfit
Island
Toys.
of Misfit Toys.
Which is right. But,
Similar.
But he, once again, the border, he declared an emergency. He declared we were at war. We are not at war. That is illegal. He had no right to do that. And that opened the door to every other illegal thing he did, which is to send at least 75% of the people who are now in El Salvador have no criminal record, period, full stop, not here or there.
Okay, so obviously we're talking about the first 100 days. Let's talk about the next election cycle for president, which is what we do here. Former Commerce Secretary and former Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo says that she is considering a run for president in 2028. She was speaking in Chicago. She criticized Democrats for being process obsessed instead of outcome obsessed, and said that her party too often tries to convince people things are better than they actually are. She says the next candidate must lead in economics. Marianne, is she going down the right plane here?
Count me as a Gina Raimondo fan and keep your eye on her because she has had an extraordinary career. She went from VC to becoming a great governor and a candidate for governor, then being honestly the most effective cabinet secretary that Joe Biden had. She's always set her sights and she's always achieved them. And she knows from growing up in Rhode Island, being governor there, being commerce secretary, what it's like not to have a job that you can support your family on. And that's what she's all about. Economics absolutely will be front and center, but you need to be a fighter, and that matters most. She's a fighter.
Jenny.
First of all, Gina who? Second of all, governor of Rhode Island? Question mark, big job. Thirdly, message. She, like every other Democrat who wants to be president, does not have a message. Process versus outcomes is not going to, rise people up to take back their country. I don't see it.
As we continue with the roundtable this morning, a stir over possible tolls on Cape Bridges. Stay with us.